All right, let's get into it, because something really big is going on in the tech world. We're talking about a fundamental reboot of what Silicon Valley is even for, a massive pivot away from our screens and towards, well, the actual foundations of the country.
Think about it. For the last, 20 years, Silicon Valley meant social media, sharing photos, getting a burrito delivered to your door in 10 minutes. It was all about bits and software. But look at the landscape now. The hottest startups today, they're not building photo filters. They're building autonomous drones, small-scale nuclear reactors, and constellations of spy satellites. We've gone from the digital world straight into the physical one.
So you have to ask, what on earth changed, right? How did the industry that gave us the like button suddenly get so obsessed with national security and heavy industry? That's the story we're going to break down.
To really get why this reboot is happening, we have to understand what was broken in the first place. And for decades, the big bug in the system was this deep, widening chasm between the tech world and, well, the rest of the country's critical needs.
And look, this wasn't just a business thing. It was basically a cultural divorce. It's easy to forget, but way back, Silicon Valley and the American mission were pretty tightly connected. But after Vietnam, working on military tech became taboo. It all came to a head in 2018 with the Google Maven protest, where employees literally revolted over a Pentagon contract. Building for the military wasn't just unpopular to a lot of people in tech, it was just plain wrong.
But it wasn't just about culture. The money just didn't work. The Pentagon was, frankly, a terrible customer. It moved at a snail's pace, with these multi-year buying cycles that are just completely alien to the move-fast world of venture capital. Startups that even tried to work with the government would get stuck in what's called the Valley of Death. They'd get a small pilot project, but then die waiting for a real big-money contract. Bottom line, it was just bad business.
But then, a series of global shocks, rising geopolitical tensions, the war in Ukraine, it forced this huge realization that the separation between tech and defense had become a massive strategic problem. And that sparked what we're calling the Great Reconvergence, all built around the new way of thinking.
And that new way of thinking has a name: American Dynamism. The VC firm Andreessen Horowitz coined the term, and it's basically an investment strategy that says the most important and, most profitable thing tech can do right now is build real stuff in the physical world. It's all about pointing Silicon Valley's speed and talent at America's hardest problems.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because at its core, this is an ideological bet. The whole belief here is that America shouldn't try to beat its rivals by copying their rigid, top-down, state-controlled model. No. Instead, it should double down on what it does best: messy, chaotic, but incredibly fast and creative free-market innovation.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. I mean, the whole idea of a 5-year plan, that was literally invented by the Soviet Union. And sure, those centralized systems are good at throwing massive resources at one single goal, but they fail again and again because the world is just too dynamic. The argument for American dynamism is that a system that can iterate in weeks, not years, has the ultimate upper hand: speed and flexibility.
And man, this idea has caught on like wildfire. The term itself only appeared in 2022, but then the war in Ukraine became this brutal, real-world proof of how critical commercial tech is in a modern fight. The political wind shifted, giving a cultural green light to build for America. And by mid-2025, venture capitalists were just pouring a record-breaking amount of cash into this space.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But what does this actually look like in the real world? How are founders actually taking this philosophy and turning bits and code into atoms and hardware?
Let's start with defense, which is really the heart of this whole movement. For decades, the Pentagon's philosophy for building things was dominated by one single idea.
And that old model was all about building exquisite systems. Think about a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier that takes a decade to build. It's a technological masterpiece, but it's so expensive and so precious that losing just one is a national disaster. The war in Ukraine showed us a new way: attributable systems. The whole idea is that you can overwhelm your enemy with thousands of cheap, mass-produced autonomous drones. The strategy is built on the idea that you can and will lose them. It's trading out old-school mass machinery and soldiers for software, speed, and creativity.
And you've got this whole new wave of companies leading the charge. You've got Anduril building autonomous drones with AI pilots that work even when GPS gets jammed. Shield AI is making AI that can fly planes that already exist. And Saronic is building autonomous warships. You see the pattern? They're all software companies that just happen to build hardware. All right, that same kind of thinking is totally transforming the space industry. For a long, long time, if you wanted to start a space company, there was basically only one playbook. We can call that Space 1.0, right? The SpaceX model. It's all about vertical integration. You build everything yourself. The rocket, the engine, the satellite, the ground station, the whole shebang. It's incredibly powerful, but it takes a ton of money and more than a decade to pull off. What's happening now is Space 2.0, this great unbundling, where new startups focus on doing just one piece of the puzzle really, really well, and that lets them move at unbelievable speeds.
So for instance, a company called Apex Space just builds the satellite bus. Think of it like the frame of a car that everything else gets bolted onto. By focusing only on that, they went from a design on a napkin to a satellite in orbit in just 13 months. It's wild. Then there's Northwood Space, which is trying to solve the data bottleneck. And yeah, it was founded by Bridget Mendler. Remember her from the Disney Channel? Now she's got degrees from MIT and Harvard and is building space infrastructure. And True Anomaly is building these little orbital vehicles to go check out potentially hostile satellites.
And this movement goes way beyond just defense and space. American Dynamism startups are also jumping into huge sectors like energy and manufacturing. The goal here is nothing short of rebuilding America's industrial independence. Now, this isn't about bringing back old, dirty factories. It's about building brand new ones, run by software, robotics, and AI, to bring those critical supply chains back home so the country can build what it needs right when it needs it.
So this convergence of technology, big money, and national security is obviously incredibly powerful. But it also brings up some really tough, really profound questions. And it's sparking a pretty high-stakes debate about the kind of future we're actually building.
First off, it's creating a totally new kind of tech founder. These folks often come from places like SpaceX or Anduril, or they've actually served in the military. They're not just in the Bay Area anymore, they're building in places like Austin, LA, and Denver. And most importantly, they have a totally different mindset. They're comfortable working with what they call messy customers like the Pentagon or local police departments.
Which brings us to a perfect and pretty controversial example, Flock Safety. This company runs a huge network of automated license plate readers that they sell to police and even homeowners associations. And their big claim is that this network helps solve 700,000 crimes every single year.
But, and this is a big but, that effectiveness comes with a huge trade-off. The ACLU and other civil liberties groups are sounding the alarm, arguing that Flock is basically building a private, nationwide mass surveillance system with very little public oversight. And right there, that's the core tension of this entire American dynamism movement.
The criticisms are serious, and they really fall into three main buckets. First is the surveillance fear, that tools built for one thing could easily be used for another, like tracking immigrants or people seeking healthcare. Second, there's a real concern that a small group of unelected venture capitalists are getting to decide our national priorities on defense and infrastructure, all without any public debate. And finally, there's the simple skepticism that this whole thing is just the old military-industrial complex with a new, slick, software-powered brand. So that's the big question we're left with, isn't it? Is American dynamism a necessary evolution, something America has to do to compete and defend its values in a pretty dangerous world? Or is it just creating a faster, sleeker, and maybe even more powerful version of the very military-industrial complex that people have worried about for decades? The answer is going to define the next chapter for tech, and maybe for the country itself.